Hello there, I'm Allison Fair, consultant here at Blue Sky Strategy Group for the latest episode of What You Need to Know, a Canadian Polycast. It has been 6 months since Joe Biden was sworn as the 46th President of the United States. In late February, President Biden held his first foreign meeting with our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Since that meeting, what has been done to strengthen the relationship between the two countries? Has the relationship been affected by the pandemic? And as Canada heads to election, will the relationship play a factor in the campaign? For those answers to those questions and more, I'm happy to have Ambassador Bruce Heyman joining me today from Aspen, Colorado, and my colleague, the Honourable Andrew Leslie, with me here, but in a different place in Ottawa. Welcome to you both.
Good to see you.
Hey, Allison.
Hi. Ambassador, tell me, what has been done to strengthen the relationship between our two countries since the inauguration of President Biden?
So a lot has been done, actually, and I think that it's the overwhelming amount of communication that really started right off the bat. As soon as the president was sworn in, that the communication began at the very top, and you had the president and the prime minister speaking directly and talking about path ahead. Then you had the vice president and many members of the U.S. cabinet speaking to their counterparts back in Ottawa. All of that conversation began the relationship building that is necessary to then take it to the next step. And that next step was the bilateral meeting that took place, where a roadmap was established of the working relationship. This is all deeply important, especially after 4 years of Donald Trump. That was so unsettling. And because everything was tactical for Donald Trump, everything was all about the win, all about America first, but not even America first. It was all about Donald Trump first, and put a lot of pressure on the relationship. I think that pressure valve has been opened up, and now we have a format in which we can most effectively communicate together.
Did that process and the planning, did that happen when we had the Trump administration come in? Or, because I know that was there when you were ambassador, but did we see that kind of diminish during Trump's term?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually, short of jumping up and down and waving my arms, I reached out to then the transition team for the Trump administration saying, I would like to sit down with you to talk about the importance of the Canada-U.S. relationship, some of the key areas that need to be focused on in the next administration, some of the sensitivities in the relationship and the opportunities. And guess what? I'm still waiting for the phone to ring. I mean, they never called. There was no real preparation done, I think, at many levels of the U.S. government. Frankly, I don't think they thought they were going to win. And then when they won, they didn't take it on professionally. Remember, Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, was responsible for transition and then was abruptly fired.
Right.
And so they really didn't have an effective transition team. And, everybody suffered domestically, but we also suffered in our international relations, especially, I think, with Canada. Then when the president started coming out and started attacking Canada and our relationship, just like he was going to negotiate a cement deal or a painting contracting deal on a piece of property, and not fully appreciating the depth and breadth of this relationship and how important it is.
Yeah, I'm going to go to you, General Leslie. During your time, you were a member of Parliament, and you were the parliamentary secretary focused on Canada-U.S. relations and helping with NAFTA. Did you see this change come about? And what do you think one needs to know when working with the United States now that we have what seems like a cooperative government compared to the last?
Well, I'd like to pick up on where the ambassador left off, and that was especially turning the hand of time back a wee ways. The strength of the relationship between President Obama and Vice President Biden and his entire cabinet with not only the Trudeau government, but that which preceded it, the Harper government, was very strong and deep and rich. And that sort of was the apogee, if you would, of the strength of the relationship and the warmth between the two countries and their two national leaders. And then we had the willful ignorance of President Trump and the mischief he delighted in causing. And I was with many others, with the Prime Minister at his first meeting at the White House. And it was patently obvious that not a lot of thought, if any, had been actually put into thinking through from the US side what Canada might be interested in. And right from the beginning, you could see the disconnects that were going to lead to the fracture points. And guess what happened? Well, fracture. And so with the arrival of President Biden, himself a veteran of many, many years in and around Washington, and at heart, a man who cares deeply about policy and the linkages and getting things done the right way, it's time for a reset. And the good news is that the Americans are still our best friends, and we hope vice versa, and they're still our largest trading partner, and many of us have family down in the United States. I know you do, so do I. The ambassador's here in Canada so often, he might as well be a family member, and thank you, Ambassador. And so there's light. There's light where before there was dark, stormy clouds.
So would you agree with that, Ambassador, that, I mean, Biden actually is quite familiar with Ottawa. He came here when he was vice president. And Andy, were you part of that as well? How do we, both of you, question is, this president obviously knows Ottawa, knows Canada. Will that help the relationship? I'll start with you, Bruce, and then go to Andy.
So yeah, I was there. That was one of my last big formal, events to take place that I participated in, and I actually picked up the then Vice President Joe Biden from the airport on a stormy day in Ottawa, stormy weather-wise, and it was a capstone, I think, in terms of the relationship and the demonstration of the importance of the relationship by the Canadian government to then Vice President Biden, but also to the administration. In that previous year, we had the president come speak before Parliament. We had the Prime Minister come to Washington for a state dinner. And, I would think that it was as good as a time in US-Canada history, at least recent history, in terms of how well we were getting along and how much we were aligned on like ideals and values. And while we still had differences and still things to tackle like softwood lumber and those kinds of things, that at the end of the day, we were literally handing that baton off in good hands. I mean, these are just a series of relay races we all have in public service, that we're there for a period of time and then we hand it off to the next. I think we anticipated it would be a dark and stormy time, but not quite as dark or as stormy as it actually turned out to be. And I think the general is absolutely right in terms of how he described that period of time and then where we ended up. Look, I remember so deeply going on US national TV, demanding an apology out of the Trump White House when Peter Navarro said there was a special place in hell for the Prime Minister of Canada, which was, that's something you would not even say to an adversary coming out of the White House in that format, and no less our best friend and ally and best trading partner and next door neighbor. And so, look, it became a weird place for a former US ambassador who then took on the mantle of not fighting for Canada, but fighting for the US-Canada relationship and the importance of it. And using that mantle of knowing that I was given this opportunity to serve, but, now I have this title. And I felt that, I kept the title for life and it comes with responsibility. And I felt if in some small way I could be a counterpoint to Donald Trump during that time period, defending this relationship, that was important to me. But I think we are now able to hand that baton very firmly onto the Biden administration, and I think the US-Canada relationship is in very, very good hands today.
Baton goes to you, General Leslie.
Well, I think on behalf of Canadians, though I have no right to speak for all of us formally, the ambassador's stalwart defense that Canada-U.S. relationship is something that people should write about, because he did keep that flame flickering, and now here we are. President Biden's arrived, the sun has come out, the birds are chirping, but there were a lot of Canadians who were expecting almost a 100% match in philosophy, in priorities, in synchronization of activities between Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Biden. Not so much. And one of the big reasons behind that, in my opinion, having met President Biden a couple of times, actually 3 times on different occasions when he was chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and his interest in Afghanistan, his interest in a whole host of details that normally wouldn't associate with chairs of a committee or indeed of a president. He knows his stuff. He has very firmly held ideas which have sort of consolidated and gelled in his mind over the last while, progressive. But if you look at it, his first real act towards Canada was the cancellation of the XL pipeline.
Right.
Then you have the revocation of the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline to pump oil from the US under the Great Lakes to Canada. Then you've got the increasingly firm language of the president vis-a-vis the allocation of resources, almost $2 trillion plus when the dust finally settles, on the Rebuilding America plan, of which great focus is on making sure the money stays in the United States. And the flip side of that is American firms can compete and win bids in Canada for our own, obviously more modest, infrastructure rebuilding plan post-COVID. Then you look at the border disarray, and it's not disarray in an administrative sense, it's disarray in a political sense. So we've opened our borders now to the US if you're double vaccinated, and that reciprocity has not happened. All this is perfectly explainable, and it's very logical when viewed from the American perspective. From the Canadian, there is some disappointment and friction building, not the least of which is the resurgence in terms of the temperature raising on the softwood lumber and dairy. And I could go on. Now, I don't want to be negative. You have to realize that this president and his White House team and the executives he's appointing are thorough professionals. These are people who've grown up with power. They're absolute experts in their various realms, and they're reflecting a long-held democratic ideology of where the priorities should lie. And of course, I would offer that they still view Canada as their closest friend, but they have their own course to set. And sometimes Canada forgets that we got to pay attention to what they may want, more so than just making demand.
Ambassador Heyman, what do you think then, taking from what Andy has said there, what do you take as what do people need to know when working with the American administration that is in place now?
So what you have to understand is that it's not going to be, all roses all the time in terms of figuring out where we have differences. And I think that the new ambassador, who will be coming hopefully soon, post-confirmation, that will have a party to work with. And that person has kind of 2 jobs. One is to communicate back to Washington very effectively what the needs are for the Canadian government and Canadian people, but also then bringing back an equal message to Canada of what the needs are for the United States and the United States government. And doing that balanced communication will be very important for the new ambassador. That being said, I think that there will always be differences because we are 2 different countries with 2 different mindsets and 2 different philosophies at times. While we're more aligned as 2 countries than many 2 countries that exist in the world, that we should never confuse that with being identical. And while someone who makes a trip to Chicago or a Chicago into Toronto may say, God, it seems like we're just alike. In some respects, that's true. In many others, we're very different. And we have to appreciate those differences and understand that. And I think that, whether you were alluding to it or not, I think it's important for Americans to understand the Canadian perspective and for Canadians to understand the American perspective. And that might help us in getting through the the natural, well, if you are our best friend, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? Which can happen on both sides of the border, because there are sets of expectations, and there are industries, there are geographic regions, there are things that are just going to be different within our countries, that we have very, very significant different perspectives from one part of our country, from one sea to another sea. And that exists also in Canada. And so if you have those differences that exist from the west side of our country, our two countries, to the east side, you can also assume that there are going to be differences, vertically as well.
Yeah, I agree. General Leslie, I'd like to ask you, brought up the point there. We have learned that the U.S. is going to keep the border closed indefinitely at this point. There is no kind of date set, just because of the COVID Delta variant and what that has taken, how it is taken effect in the United States at this point. When do you think our border will open? Because that seems to be the big thing that companies and Canadians and Americans really want to know. Do we see it now with this Delta variant? Do we see it reopening anytime soon?
Well, Prime Minister Trudeau's job one is to keep Canadians secure and safe. And President Biden's job one is to keep Americans secure and safe. It's interesting that there is this unsynchronized tussle taking place between such close friends and allies. And the Delta variant is obviously very, very dangerous. It's not necessarily more lethal, but it's more likely to be sticky in that sense, greater propagation. But it also might point to some other issues. So both the ambassador and I have alluded to the fact that we have to listen to each other perhaps a little bit more now than we used to, because things have changed. Not only the mischief is Donald Trump, which I referred to earlier, but also COVID, the increasing world tensions vis-a-vis emergent powers versus respects to the rule, challenges to the rule of law, the World Trade Organization, to NATO, to NORAD. And so in that context, it's not surprising that the president would say, my job one is to take care of my people. Not our people, my people.
Yeah.
That's a different twist. And there's a variety of messages in that as well. Don't want to read too much into it, but we do have to listen more. And next time a senior American comes up here and says, we need more Canada in NATO and NORAD, let's just not listen to the first half of that sentence. Let's also listen to the second.
Ambassador Heyman, I know I've seen your comments on social media that you are dying to get back here to come visit your friends in Canada. And I know that we would love to see you back up here. What's your thoughts on the reopening of the border now that we don't know when it's going to happen?
So we do know that Americans will be able to go to Canada if you've been double vaxxed and you have a negative COVID test within 72 hours.
Right.
And so a large number of people who have not been able to get together with loved ones, with partners, with family and friends, there is a path to now getting back together. And that's a good path. Also remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the airlines still have been able to do flights back and forth between our countries.
Right.
I think the issue is more land border oriented. And I think that hopefully we'll find a path to opening Canada soon. I think the decision process, though, has to be in Homeland Security. Are we opening one border and having a different standard for one border versus another? Or are we going to open both borders together simultaneously under a set of rules and standards? And I think that's an important decision. And while many Canadians go, we'll just open our side, it's fine. The reality is it comes with a lot of complexity for the US government to open only one border. And then what is this decision process? Are we going to let people in our country with a vaccine only or not? Are we going to have a certain type of testing? Which vaccines would be approved? What if one of your vaccines, which you have and are using, isn't technically approved in the United States as we sit here today. So how do you deal with that? What about third-party vaccines that are taking, place around the world that are being used? Canada's made the decision, these are the only ones that we're going to accept. Is the US looking at a broader set, especially if that broader set is being distributed in Mexico? And we have alternative vaccines being used there. So this is a lot more complicated than many believe. And I think that don't misinterpret the fact that we're not open in the exact same way together as is something that we're not communicating and we're not going back and forth and having that conversation. My sense is, and I think the deputy chief of mission, the charge d'affaires, Ambassador Chacon and Ambassador Heyman said such this last week, communication is taking place. But my guess is that communication probably went something like, we're ready. And how about you? And the US wasn't ready all along, but it did not stop Canada from proceeding and saying, go ahead, which I think, people have to recognize, again, how hard it is sometimes to implement these things from the US perspective. And it's a lot more complicated when you border two countries, not just one.
Well,
But
and you know what?
I'm very excited to get back up, and Vicky and I are coming in September.
That's fantastic. Before we go, I just want your quick thoughts, both of you, on the news last week that we will have a new ambassador to Canada, and David Cohen. Your thoughts briefly, Andy. I'll start with you, and then Bruce, go to you.
Well, I'm impressed. He's been a lawyer. He's been a political chief of staff. He's been a lobbyist. He's been a senior executive vice president of a giant telecommunications conglomerate. He's a very, very strong political operative. He's got a great career. He's had a great career in politics so far, where I think, let me just check my notes. He was rated the third most influential person in Pennsylvania, his home state. Let's not forget, he's really good at fundraising. He knows the Biden family, and it's important. He is the personal representative of the President of the United States to Canada. And unlike many, many other ambassadors, he can actually pick up the phone and in a very short period of time, be talking to the president or the vice president, which speaks well of how the president views Canada and speaks well of the choice that has been made, because he's a business person. He knows politics. He's got the ear of the democratic institution. And he's also appears to be a problem solver and a networker. So gosh, he sounds like another couple of ambassadors that I know.
I was going to say, I think we knew an ambassador who was quite good at the networking. Correct there, Ambassador?
Absolutely. So on that note, I'll say, you know what? I'll say 2 thumbs up.
Ambassador Heyman, your thoughts on the nomination based on your experience?
Wow, I'd say ditto, ditto, ditto. I would say he comes with a lot of experience, as I think the general had so beautifully articulated. And the most important thing for Canada is that he has the ability to communicate directly within the White House and the West Wing, and to have conversations that will be important for Canada. You see, Canada, like many of our other key allies in the world, have access to the State Department, have access to professional foreign service officers within the embassy in Ottawa and consulates throughout the country and within Washington. What they want, in addition to having good skills, is somebody who has the ability to communicate directly into the White House, which is very different than many other career ambassadors. Not all of them, but many of them wouldn't follow that path of communication because they don't have those relationships. And so I'm very excited and look forward to being helpful in any and every way that Vicky and I can be helpful in this transition from having no Senate confirmed ambassador for 2 years
Correct.
in Ottawa to having a Senate confirmed ambassador very shortly. And we're very excited.
Yes, it'll be a very exciting day when that happens. Ambassador Heyman and General Leslie, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a great discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Be
And
well.
thank you to the viewers for tuning into What You Need to Know, a Canadian Polycast. Take care, and until next time.
Blue Sky Strategy Group is one of Canada's leading public affairs firms. For government relations, lobbying, and strategic communications advice across Canada, visit us at blueskystrategygroup.com. Blue Sky Strategy Group is a proud member of the Global Communications Alliance.